my fellow paisanis in Staten Island. My name is Francesca Romolo, and I do a show here on Saturdays at 8 p.m. called Toastmasters in the Community. I gave a speech because I wanted to bring out my Sicilian heritage to people, and I would like to share that speech with you and share with you a little slice, un taglio, of Sicilian life and what it's like to be single as a Sicilian. Ooh, that's taboo. Bedda, Risitatta, e Sistimatta, a staple in discourse among old-fashioned Sicilian women. And what does that mean? It means to be nicely settled and organized. And this phrase was given to the Sicilian women's daughters once they were married. This phrase, of course, is in dialect, Bedda, Risitatta, Sistimatta, and it would be used by people in my town, my family's town, where we come from, of Sant'Aninfa in the province of Trapani. People in the neighboring towns like Bartana, Gibellina, Corleone, Galtabellotta, Castellammare, they would use the same phrase because we spoke the same dialect, and a lot of these people from the province of Trapani, from these towns, came with the third largest waves of immigrants to America in the 1950s, and a lot of them settled in my town of Bushwick in Brooklyn, New York. Bedda, Risitatta, Sistimatta. This phrase would resound in my ears for years to come. My childish ears would hear the phrase at Scaturo's supermarket on Knickerbocker Avenue. Mom would bump into a paisana of hers, and the paisana was older, and she would announce very proudly that her daughter had just gotten married, and her daughter was now Bedda, Risitatta, e Sistimatta. Sometimes this phrase and announcement would be followed by a sweeping of the mouth, meaning I'm shutting my mouth because there's nothing more to say. And for greater pontification, she would say, "Non ne parlare più, figlia mia," because my daughter got married, and that was the end-all to end-all for Sicilian mothers. So there was nothing more to say. Well, you know, the Sicilian mother spent a lot of time cultivating her daughter. It was more important for the daughter to get married than the son. I mean, it was a real big thing, and probably still is in Sicily. Maybe here also, because of course every mother wants to see their daughter nicely settled and organized and set for life and taken care of. So it's understandable, but the Sicilian mother would cultivate the daughter, teaching her how to cook, how to sew, how to clean, la pulizia, because of course to the Sicilians, la pulizia, cleanliness was next to godliness. And if you had a visitor come to your house and everything was clean, they said that your house was so clean che ci mangiasse un ovo. But if your house was dirty, manco un ovo ci mangiasse nella tua casa con la scorcia, meaning they wouldn't even eat an egg with a shell in your house. This is a very old Sicilian saying. Also, they taught their daughters to embroider for the hope chest, la biancheria. So they would embroider and embroider. And in Sicily, the Italian daughters, they sit in the balcony, as my mother did in the 40s, and her sisters embroidering. So it was very important for the Sicilian mother to get her daughter married, and a big accomplishment because now she felt that she had done her job correctly, and she was very proud of this. And now she could go to her grave senza pensieri, meaning without any worries. Now she can die. Being single in adulthood, I was branded the name Schetta Vecchia, meaning old maid in Sicilian. Mom even questioned her choice of a godmother for me, Maria di Leonardo. Della parrina venne la spina, meaning that one gets the same spine as the godmother. My godmother, Maria di Leonardo, was beautiful. She was intelligent, independent, and a stand-in for Sophia Loren. My mother would accuse me of being picky like my godmother. Spitignosa means very picky. And she would say that I would say, just like my godmother, questo è così e quello è così, meaning this one's like this and that one's like that. Just like my godmother, she was never happy and she never got married even until her mature death. I don't know why I didn't get married. Maybe I didn't find the right one. Why didn't I find the right one? I don't know. Maybe I attracted controlling men, and maybe I just didn't take commands well. I don't know. Or maybe it was my disappointment in my suitors for misrepresenting themselves. Whatever the case, you know, the decades rolled on and I was still single, and Mom would get increasingly embarrassed. Sometimes a paisana would stop her in the street and say, "Hey, Lena, did your daughter ever get married? Bedda, the real pretty one? Franzina, did she ever get married?" Mom would say in defense, "You know, with all these divorces that are going on, you never know who you're going to get. Meglio sola che mal accompagnata," which means that it's better to be alone than in bad company. Or better yet, she would say, "Dopo le confette affacciano le defette," meaning that when the bride gets married and in her at her party, her celebration, she gives out the Jordan omelets. Almonds, of course, with the bomboniere, because you know, us Sicilians, we do things in a big way. So it's not just the Jordan almonds, it's like a bomboniere, like a small espresso machine or a fancy crystal ashtray or frame. And then you have a net with the Jordan almonds. So the phrases that Mom would say was, "Dopo le confette affacciano le defette." So after the bride would give out the bomboniere with the Jordan almonds, the confette, the defects of the groom would start to show. It would have been nice to get married, to tell you the truth. I almost did get trapped. And boy, I would have been stuck with a real pignolo. And the reason why I called this person a pignolo is because when you make the pignolata, which is a Sicilian pastry, here in America they know it as honey balls. And, but they're supposed to be hard because you work the dough. You work the dough. I know a recipe from over 100 years old, my great-grandmother Nika's recipe in Santa Ninfa, where you just use eggs and dough and flour. And without water, it makes it very hard, but that's the way the recipe is. And you have to keep kneading it and kneading it. And it's so difficult to knead. And you make these long ropes and then cut them up and fry them and melt the honey on top with the nonpareils. That's the pignolata. So in my town, we call somebody a man who is difficult because sometimes the woman doesn't know who she's going to get, and she's stuck with a real pignolo, you know, and that's terrible. Unfortunate for the woman. And because then they have to stay together, because getting divorced is a big scandalo, and it still is in my family, even though, you know, we're the American generation now. So I almost got stuck with the piñolo, but thank God I never did. You know, being single afforded me so many opportunities to develop my intellect and my spirituality. It also gave me lots of time to take care, thoroughly take care of an aging mother, and to take on more shifts. I'm a nurse, and back then, well, I was a pediatric nurse, and you know, it gave me more shifts to take care of lovable children. I'm not in pediatrics anymore, I'm in psychiatric, but I took care of beautiful, loving children, and I really wouldn't change that for the world. And so I guess Francesca means free, and that's what I was meant to be, but until I meet the right one, I'm 54, I'm fabulous, and I am Bedda, Risitatta, and Sistimatta. Non ne parlare più, figlia mia. Capisci? To share with you a bit about my nationality and heritage, being Italian, and more specifically being Sicilian. Why do I say Sicilian? Because you know what? We're on an island right at the boot of Sicily, in between Italy, the peninsula of Italy, and Africa. And we have kind of the same blood that make up the Italian people on the peninsula, which is what? Greek, Italic people, Roman, barbarian, Byzantine, Norman, and so on. But we're just a little more spicier because we have the North African influence, because as you may well know, in the year 900, a collection of Muslims came to Sicily and conquered. And they gave us a lot. Also, they gave us a lot of influence on our dialect. Now, I come from the northwest corner of Sicily in the province of Partanna, where there's a strong Arab influence, a strong North African influence. So a lot of the words are evident in our language. Like, for instance, if someone is not married, they might say, "Oh, miskina, she never got married," like, poor thing. But that's really an Arab word, from miskin, meaning poor, impoverished, or whatever. And, well, in my last speech, I told you a little bit about what it's like to be single in an old-fashioned Sicilian family, because my parents are I'm first generation American. They came right off the banana boat, and I come from a very strict, ancient family. And I say ancient because they've been there for years. I can go back to my great-great-grandmother. And I even have recipes from over 150 years old that I'd like to share with you. But speaking about food, as you know, I'm single, but I attract a lot of Jewish men. And why is it throughout my lifetime that these Jewish men, as soon as they find out that I'm Italian, the first question they ask me is, "Can you cook?" Or, will you cook for me sometime? Well, I got used to it, so I would beat them to it and say, I would talk about food and some of the recipes that I made and I learned from my mother. And they would be enthralled and want to hear all about it, and then they'd want to taste my food and everything. So I would invite them home with my mother, and we'd be cooking up a storm, and my mother would invite them and say, "What a nice boy he is. Don't you like him, Francesca?" Mom was something else. She taught me how to cook with that spoon. I can share so many recipes with you. I'd like to share one particular recipe. It really irks me to know that people go to the bakery and pay good money for honey balls around Easter time or maybe for Christmas. They're soft. No, the real Sicilian honey balls are hard, like a tooth, like an olive maybe, you know. And my grandmother, Nonna Margherita, she taught me how to make it. And this is how you make it. This is the real way. And when you go to the bakery, I want you to tell them they should make the real Sicilian honey balls, la pignolata. La pignolata is made with dough, a little bit of salt, and only egg yolks. Of course, you have to separate them with the eggshell. Make sure you don't get too much white in the dough mixture, because when you fry them up in the oil, you deep fry them, you're going to get a lot of foam bubbling up, and you don't want that. So you work the dough, and it's a hard dough to work. It's very difficult because it's just egg yolk and farina, which is flour. And you work it and work it, and you work it into long ropes. It's very laborious and difficult. Like I said, if you get stuck with a pignolo, that means that you got stuck with an abusive husband or a bad, difficult husband, because they get that saying from the pignolata. He's like a pignolo. Anyway, you work them into long ropes. And by the way, you just add as many egg yolks as you need for the flour to make it pliable. Okay, there's no measuring. Really, in Sicilian cookery, there's no measuring. It's just this and that. Un poco di questo, un poco di quello. And you keep working and keep working. And you make ropes, long ropes, that are about the width of your pinky in diameter. And then you just cut them. My grandmother used to say, no, don't cut them too long. Cut them como un dente, just like a tooth, the size of a tooth, because then they'll blow up when you deep fry them. And then when you have them all on your scannatura, on your wooden board, you would, flour them so they don't stick together. And of course you flour the board so that it doesn't stick to the board. And you deep fry them. Put them aside, put them on a paper towel to drain. And meanwhile, riscaldi l'umele. You take the honey and you're, heating it up so it gets a little thin. And then you build a mountain on a plate. Build a mountain of the pignolata. Build a mountain of the cooked nuggets. They should be brownish, but not burnt, just like golden brown. And then you pour the hot honey on top, and then the non-imperials. That's it, and you let it set. And then you can wrap it up in cellophane paper, whatever, and give them out maybe for the holidays. So that's the real pignolata. In Sicily, I learned a lot. I learned from my grandmother how to make pasta di casa, a casalinga. I remember in '79 I went there. I was only about 21 years old. And my grandmother announced that we were going to the country. And I said, okay, so what do we do? How do we dress? She goes, niente, really, Sant'Anifa is built on 3 hills, so it really wasn't far away. They would just call it the country. So my grandmother had a little, a macaseno, a little bungalow there on top of one of the 3 hills. Aluferro, which was called the iron place, because we had for water a pipe that went through the rock of the hill. There was a big rock and the water would come out there, and that's how we would get the water. I mean, we really roughed it up when we went campagna. And I remember my grandmother was there with my cousin's paternal grandmother and other older ladies, and we were making the pasta outside on a big wooden board called uscanaturo. And we rolled it. We plucked some wheat out that was growing wildly, and from the stem of the wheat, we rolled the pasta to make curls. And then we hung it on the line. And then, I know to some people maybe this is gross, but I couldn't believe it. I was waiting for the plates to be passed around. I knew we were going to eat outside, and the wooden scanaturo was right there placed on top of some chairs. And then there were chairs placed around, and I'm waiting for them to hand out the dishes. And my grandmother says, "What dishes?" And I says, "Aren't we going to eat the pasta now with the sauce?" And my grandmother says, "Yeah." So along comes my grandmother's paisana. She was helping in the cooking. She comes with a big, tall piñata, a pot of the steaming home-cooked pasta. And she dumps it right in the middle of the scanaturo. It was a big mountain. And we were seated all around, my cousin, my Aunt Anna, my grandmother, and the other ladies that came. I vecchiereddi, they were like all dressed in black. Because in Italy, once the husband dies, you have to wear black forever until you die. I don't know. I would never get used to it. Anyway, they gave out the forks, and here comes, another lady that was there, a friend of my grandmother's, and she pushes the pasta down and makes a dome, and she pours sauce right in the middle of the mountain of pasta. And this was a lot of pasta because we spent hours making it. And then we got the forks, and each one was grabbing a portion for themselves, just from the middle. And I said, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're eating like this. We'd never do this in America." But I tell you, it was so much fun. I got used to it. I took some pasta and scraped it towards me, and I ate it. And I'm telling you, that was the most delicious pasta I ever ate, made from real durum semolina wheat from Sicily. Because remember, our wheat, I think, is the best in the world. The Romans prized our wheat. And when they conquered us and held us as slaves, they exported our wheat to Rome, which was overpopulated, so they needed food for their population. And we fed them. We were their granary, because this durum wheat held for weeks and weeks. It didn't spoil like regular wheat. And so it's made from durum wheat and wonderful country eggs, salt, and just being out there in the country, all'uferro. It was just a magical time. Maybe it was the air or whatever that touched the food. And maybe it was my youth, I was only 21 then, that gave me a sweetness about that era, about eating that pasta. I never ate pasta like that ever again. And of course, we had meatballs and sausages that were stewed in the pot of sauce, l'urau. And that's what ragu really means. It's a stew of all different kinds of meats, pig knuckles, sausage, pieces of beef, meatballs. Really delicious. Mom taught me a lot of things, and let me tell you, she taught me with that wooden spoon, la cucchiara di legno. And she didn't just use that spoon for stirring the sauce on Sundays. She used it to teach me how to do everything properly in order to prepare me for marriage, which never happened because I'm schetta vecchia now, branded schetta vecchia. But anyway, at least I know how to do these things for myself and my friends. She taught me how to iron with that spoon because I couldn't go out and play. You know, as a 12-year-old, she was standing there with that spoon, and I had to get every crease out and whatever. And then Saturdays, in my childhood, Saturdays were spent for cleaning the house. And boy, she would stand there with the spoon, and we had to put that pink, remember that old-fashioned pink wax on the cloth, and the flannel cloth, and we rubbed hard on her mahogany bedroom furniture. I mean, we had to wax the furniture till it shined. And she taught us how to sew, knit, just everything. But I'm grateful for it. I mean, we had the spoon and we had the strap for when we were bad. That came from my father. But I tell you, you know, I don't know. I'm not for capital punishment. It might be viewed as, you know, abuse or whatever, but you know, we did turn out very well and good people. So I don't know. I don't think I would trade my Sicilianness and Italianness for anything else in the world. I'm glad I was born Italian, and you know, I'm glad that I took on the traditions. I'm glad that I know the dialect and I know how to speak the proper Italian, because of course I took Italian in college for an easy A. And I'm glad that people like Italians too. They like Italian food. People are interested in the culture, and they ask me questions when they find out that I'm first generation. I just want to tell you something about that spoon, which I just thought of. My mother, when she came here, she noticed that the first generation American Italians were starting to call sauce gravy. So she didn't understand what it meant. Then we bought a house on DeKalb Avenue, a little further away from Stanhope Street, because we lived right off the avenue, Knickerbocker Avenue. But then by the time I was about 10 years old, we moved to DeKalb Avenue. And we had German neighbors, Irish neighbors, and a Lithuanian neighbor, Helen, and she would say, "Oh, I'm cooking gravy today." So my mother says, "Oh, Elena, what you making? Meatloaf?" And Helena would say, "No, I'm making what you're making." You know, it was a Sunday, spaghetti with gravy. And my mother, she couldn't understand it. So she would say, "I don't understand these Americani. They call the sauce gravy." So which one is it, sauce or gravy? I just don't know how it got lost in the translation. You know, maybe the secret is buried with our Italian ancestors that came here centuries ago. Maybe they translated the word and people told them that sauce was called gravy. I don't know. But there's a big heated debate about sauce or gravy. So, but anyway, whatever you call it, it's delicious. And, you know, I'll call it la salsa, and I love to make piñolata my way, and I'm glad I'm Sicilian. So thank you for being here and sharing my life with you all. Thank you. Mwah.